Hey there, it's Seb Frey here with another exciting episode of It's a Seb Show. And today I want to talk about as-is sales. Now, we hear that a lot, an as-is sale, and I think there's a great deal of uncertainty or confusion in the home buying public about what exactly an as-is sale means. Okay, so let me back up a little bit. So here in California, we have the wonderful and awesome California Association of Realtors, and CAR, as we call it. They have their own residential purchase agreement. Now, this is the standard contract that is used throughout the state of California. Now, some areas have their own contract, like San Francisco has its own contract. Certain parts of Silicon Valley use their own contract. I'm sure other communities have some contracts that are used. But even in these places where there are other contracts available, a lot of people still use the California Association of Realtors purchase agreement. It's kind of like the default de facto contract that most properties, most resale properties are sold with. Okay, so in that contract, there is a clause which says that the sale is as is. So what that means is that the buyer will have an inspection period. They can inspect the property, do a termite inspection and a home inspection and a septic inspection, a well inspection, mold tests, asbestos tests, or whatever they want to do, survey. They can do anything they want to do, right? And at the end of their inspection period, also known as a due diligence period, they're supposed to release their inspection contingency, right? So what happens during that inspection period is that the buyer will probably find some stuff that they didn't know about the property that wasn't disclosed to them before they made their offer. Now, honestly, most of the time it's stuff that the seller didn't even know or hadn't honestly thought to disclose, right? So the buyer does their inspections and they find out X, Y, and Z, right? Okay, well, like, hey, there's some termite damage here, or, oh, the roof is going to need to be replaced like in another 2 or 3 years, or whatever it is they didn't know was wrong with the property. They will oftentimes ask the seller for a concession. They'll say, hey, dear seller, I didn't realize that, I need to spend like $5,000 on termite, treatment, and I didn't know that I need to put a new roof on for $12,000 in the next couple of years. So I'm going to ask you to do a repair or issue a credit of some kind or reduce the price to reflect the work that I feel that I need to put into the property. Well, because it's an as-is sale, the seller does not have to do any of that. They're not required to do any of that work for you no matter what you request. In fact, the seller is not even required to respond to the buyer's request for a repair. The seller can simply ignore that and issue a notice to the buyer to perform, say, go ahead, release your inspection contingency. I don't need to do anything for you. So that is what an as-is sale means. The seller doesn't have to do any of that stuff. But here's the kicker. At the same time, the buyer doesn't have to proceed with the sale. If the buyer isn't satisfied as to the condition of the property after they complete their inspection period, the buyer can just walk away, right? They get their deposit back, and everyone leaves as friends almost. So, but what usually happens, though, is that because the seller usually wants to sell and the buyer usually wants to buy, they are usually able to come to some kind of accommodation, right? The seller may give the buyer everything the buyer is asking for, some of what the buyer is asking for, something instead of what the buyer is asking for, or maybe nothing at all, and the buyer just closes anyway, even though the seller won't make any concession, right? That's what an as-is sale means, okay? Is that the seller doesn't have to do anything, but the buyer can walk away, but usually it's negotiated, right? If there's a buyer that wants to buy and a seller that wants to sell, all of this can usually be worked out. Now, Mr. Seller, here's my advice to you. Because you want an as-is sale, what you need to do is you need to thoroughly pre-inspect your property and make sure that all of your disclosures that you make are as accurate and complete as possible, so that when the buyer makes their as-is offer to you, that they are completely informed as to the condition of the property, so they won't have much room when their inspection period is over to hit you up asking you for a concession. If they know that there's termite damage that needs to be repaired, if they know the roof only has 2 or 3 years left, if they know the well pump is not working very well, or like whatever there happens to be with the property, they can't very easily turn around and ask you for a concession on that And they certainly can ask you for a concession on that. They can ask for anything, but remember, it's an as-is sale. You don't have to even reply to their request. And if you've done all that work up front, you've given them the inspection reports, they're not going to have much of a leg to stand on if they're going to you and asking you for some kind of concession or a repair or a price reduction or something like that. So that's my advice to you. Always make a full and complete disclosure when at all possible. Do your home inspection and termite inspection, because in 98% of the cases, the money you save by doing those inspections up front is considerable amount of money. Because most buyers, when they know about these repairs ahead of time, they'll just take the property anyway, right? They'll know the property is priced to reflect its current condition, and they'll just accept it, or they won't make an offer. They'll make an offer accordingly based on what they know of the condition, or they'll make an offer that's not an as-is offer. They'll say, hey, I want you to provide Section 1 termite clearance. I see here from the termite report that there's some Section 1 damage. I want you to give me Section 1 termite clearance before we close escrow. And that would not be an as-is sale. That would be as-is except for the termite clearance. That's very common, for example, with a VA loan. A VA loan buyer requires Section 1 termite clearance. So there are some circumstances where there won't be an as-is sale, but that must be clearly enumerated in the purchase agreement, and almost all sales always are as-is except in some rare cases. All right, well, I hope that you learned something there about what an as-is sale is. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me all over the internet. Just look for @SebFrey. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And of course, you can email me, sebfrey@sebfrey.com. Hey, do me a huge favor, though. Would you give me a like, a thumbs up, a comment, or a share? I would really appreciate it. That would be super awesome. All right, well, that is it for this episode of It's a Seb Show. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. And I will have another episode up again before too long.